Welcome to Business is Good, the podcast all about what it means to be in business in the 21st century. Small and medium-sized businesses are the lifeblood of the UK economy, and globally they can and will have a huge impact on society, the economy and how we live our lives. From technology disruption to reworking a solution to solve the world's biggest problem, Business is Good is a podcast about what it takes to be successful and how every business defines that in different ways. Business is no longer just about being defined by what you do, but it's about giving back and redefining the problems and how we solve them in a way that works for you. I'm your host, Caroline Sumners, and I'll be giving you weekly inspirational stories from business owners who are building business and solving problems. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Business is Good podcast. This is your host, Caroline Sumners, and today I am talking to Alex Chisnall, podcaster extraordinaire, host himself of the Screw It, Just Do It podcast, and fellow South Coast of the UK resident, although a few miles down the road from me. But in this episode, I'm talking to Alex about starting, running, and basically getting going with podcasting. Obviously, the focus of this series is to think about different ways that you can grow your modern business. And podcasting has seen a massive explosion in the last few years. Alex has been recording his podcast for 3 years, I think, and also now runs a successful Facebook group called Podpreneur, and also is now teaching other people how to get going with podcasting, which is actually how I met Alex about just over a year ago, I guess. I attended a one-day course down in Bournemouth with Alex where we talked about how to get going with your podcast, what the things that you should do, and maybe the things not to do. So I had a great chat with Alex about all things podcasting. So enjoy. I know when I came to do a course with you about podcasting, you said, if you can, do the podcast in person. So what have we done? Over Zoom. So yeah. But are you now at the point where you're literally doing every interview in person?
No. So my advice here is to be flexible, which I think you can relate to with your experience, which I was listening about in your last episode. So for example, Rob Moore from the Disruptive Entrepreneur podcast, like number one business podcast in the UK. Love him or loathe him. I tried to get Rob on my show before. We had a bit of banter on Twitter, then couldn't get in touch with him again. And then, funnily enough, his team contacted me before Christmas saying, can you interview Rob for your show? Which I thought was quite an interesting point to be in my podcast journey when people of that ilk reach out to be on my show. And I wanted to meet him in person. For me, the connection is just that much more powerful when you meet someone in person. Automatically network building, which, I advise everybody to do. My network has just grown exponentially since doing my podcast. It's insane. And I really wanted to do that in person, but I've had to succumb to both of our schedules and do it online, which is fine. But what I try and do now is I definitely went from doing all of mine online as a conscious decision, just because I could then reach people from all over the globe and literally do it in an afternoon, record a month's content, 4 interviews, in an afternoon, is go to London for a day every month and interview a bunch of people, because if they're not already in London, it's a pretty easy place to get to for most people, an hour and a half or whatever. And likewise, I could get to Manchester, etc. So I do go there. Again, what I've learned is that people do cancel on you, sometimes 30 minutes before you're due to meet them in London, naming no names. And I will now try to book 5 or 6 interviews, knowing that at least one will always cancel. And I want to do the same when I go back to the States now is, yes, stay a couple of nights and book a bunch of interviews. And for me, this was always my aim. My aim was to always make, my passion is meeting interesting people and telling their stories. Simple as that. And therefore, as I say, the connection is more powerful if I can meet them in person. It expands my network. And it's just a fun thing to do. I just like people. So, it's taken me nearly 3 years to get to that position to do that. And I'm not in the position that I could do that every couple of weeks, having just started, a relatively new business off the back of the podcast agency. So, but yeah, it's, you set your goal and you work towards it, don't you? Or you reverse engineer it anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I've tried to do as many as I can in person. I guess the thing for me is most of the people I did for the first series, not most, maybe 70% I had a previous relationship with. So I asked people that I already knew. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of okay to do that by Zoom. Yeah. But I did definitely reach out to people I didn't know. And in most cases, they all said yes. Only one that I really wanted to do said, no, your podcast isn't well established enough.
Really?
Yeah. Interesting.
And was
that a company, actually? It was a company rather than a person.
And was it because they therefore then asked for your statistics for your podcast and you gave them to them and then they went, thanks?
No, well, actually, I hadn't even launched at that point. So
okay, yeah.
I hadn't even launched. So I said, it's a new podcast. This is the theme. This is what it's about. And it fit perfectly with them as a business, I thought. And they were keen. But then when they said, no, and I get it, of course.
Yeah.
So I will try again with that company, probably next series, I think. I definitely will try again. And then one I did last series, which I did with Alice
Reed.
And Sophie from who you knew coincidentally.
I knew.
Which was just bizarre. I went to see them and I didn't know them. I went to see them in Brighton and I didn't know them previously, but I just love what they were all about.
Love Alice.
And so I dropped them a message on Instagram and said, I really love what you're doing. I'm doing this podcast. Do you want to come on it? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So I just got on the train up to Brighton and actually that was so fun. We just sat in a room for an hour and it was really good. So I can definitely see the power of doing it in person. But as you say, trying to get it done when you're also trying to still service clients like I am from a marketing perspective was quite hard. But my goal was at this series, I would do more in person. So far, I haven't done any in person. Oh no, I've done one in person. No, that's not true. I did one on Wednesday, and I've done 2 in person actually, and I'm on recording number 5. So actually, I'm doing better, and I've got one next week. So I'm trying. I'm getting there with doing it in person.
I mean, the other thing is you'll find, or I found, is that I then thought, I'm running around London like an absolute maniac. And I thought I would leave half an hour in between each interview. And half an hour isn't enough in London, especially if it happens to be, at rush hour. So then I left an hour, but I'm smoked at the end of the day, leaving London. And it's taken me on average 45 minutes to go from, say, the Olympic Park in Stratford to like Marylebone. Is like the same as going from London to bloody Cardiff or something like that.
Yeah. You know what you need to do? You need to start a podcasting studio.
Funnily enough, that's what I booked them. Booked a studio. Tried to get them to the studio. Can you get everyone to the studio? No, because the people that I'm now, as you say, I've kind of gone up the rungs of the ladder. Is that they want me to come to them, and I get it. I'm interviewing, and this again, I'm not name dropping. I'm just saying this is how it goes, and this is for the Festival of Enterprise that I'm interviewing. Lord Billamoria, Cobra Beer founder. I can't remember the title, but something like. Look him up, Google him. But chairman of the CBI, something like that. And it's a map of the House of Lords saying you will enter via the Peers entrance and And I'm like, okay, he ain't coming to no studio. So it is what it is. And my tip is, go with the flow, be flexible.
Yeah.
I'm going to the office for someone else, another person who's not from London, but is making the effort to come to London to see me. I will either book a meeting room or probably book a studio. And again, you get, it depends how much money you pay, the kind of experience you get with the studio, shall we say. But
okay. So when you first, obviously you get people coming to you now.
Yeah.
But when you first started out, how did you go about getting guests? I mean, was it really a question like I've done of like tap up people or people of people and then just go from there? Or was there? How did you go about getting people you didn't know at all? I mean, what's your top tip?
Yeah, so you're right. So like now, literally every day, I will get at least one or two messages from either PR agencies or podcast promoters. It's what they call themselves. So I guess that's the same thing as like a music promoter or something like that. It's a job.
Wow.
But invariably they get it wrong because they're trying to sell the person or the business, but not the story behind the person or the business. And so 9 times out of 10, nothing resonates with me when I read, they usually attach a press release or a, blurb of some kind of bio, and they just go about it in the wrong way. Or for me, at least, anyway, I don't want to talk about someone's business. I want to know the story, what's got them to that point. And yes, part of my job as a podcast host is to pull that out, but I need something to attract me to that story. Unless it's like, here's the founder of Starbucks or whatever, then I go, okay, boom, you're in, But to start with,
it's a bit different, I suppose.
And like I was saying a minute ago with, and likewise your experience on Instagram, when I've had this NFL American football player respond to my message on Instagram, all I've done, this is it's a great example, is I literally sent, because I didn't have any time and I was doing it to try and get extra interviews while I was in San Fran. I literally messaged everybody on Instagram, but his first thing when he came back to me was, apologies for not getting back to you sooner, but this is the first time I've looked at my Instagram this year. And again, I guess he's just taken time out and he doesn't post that regularly when I look. He's quite reticent in that regard. And, I kind of get it with the backstory he's had. He hasn't, shared it with a lot of people. But to start with, for me, and my recommendation again is people or your friend or family has an easy intro to. So I always say start local, then go regional, then go national, then go international. But as a preface to that, I would say write 2 lists. One is top 100 people you would like on your podcast in the world ever that's still alive, obviously. Reach for the stars kind of stuff. And then another top 100 list of more realistic options that you think, if I needed to record this within the next 30 days, could I get them booked in?
Yeah.
So, and chip away at both and have, I did it in a pad of paper to start with, but, have a spreadsheet where you've got something that shows that every quarter, spring, summer, autumn, etc., that you contact that person. So you let them know that you're there. And for me, it's been the perseverance and my determination to get people on the show that have got me people on the show. I've got people on my show, the likes of Lewis Howes, Chris Ducker, Pat Flynn, John Lee Dumas, a lot of these people from the States. It's taken them a year to get back to me. And I've been in touch with the likes of Tim Ferriss and Gary Vaynerchuk, but they haven't come back round. But it's not been for my lack of trying. It's when it suited them, which I'm totally down with, totally cool about that. But if you don't keep on, then they're not going to notice you. And, another way is to, it might be a bit obvious, but follow them on every form of social media that they do, see which platform they're more active on, like their stuff. More than that, share it. More than that,
share. Yeah.
Comment on it. Absolutely.
So it's just the same approach as if you're trying to sell someone something, isn't it, really? I mean,
yeah, because you're selling yourself, you're selling your show.
Yeah.
But for me, you make it all about them. I've got a client now, again, who's come through, done amazingly well, Jonathan Bowman Perks, Inspiring Leadership Podcast. Within 2 months, within 8 weeks, he's top 5 UK podcasts, top 20 in France, Italy, Switzerland, all sorts of countries. Amazing. And what he's done really, really well is one, follow the instructions, but he's leveraged his network. So what I do now, again, is every person I have on my show, I will ask them to recommend somebody to interview. And, it's in their interest to give you someone good. They're not going to recommend somebody rubbish because they want to sound a bit important. They want to make out that they're a big deal. They want to help you because you've just helped them. So, make it all about them is my advice. So, this is my platform. And now what I've said to Jonathan is, your emails start with top 5 rated Apple podcast.
Yeah.
That's a great, that opens, and mine, started with the same thing, but, number 1 rated Apple podcast, that gets your email opened far more often, or your Instagram message or your LinkedIn message. For me, I've got most of my stuff from LinkedIn, I'll be honest. But that's probably, again, because my audience hangs out on LinkedIn. Your audience might hang out on Instagram or might be more. I
think it's mine's Instagram and LinkedIn, actually.
Yeah.
I got a question though, because it's to do with the kind of like top 5 and we're talking a minute about your when I launched your recommendations for how to do it so that you got into the top 20 or whatever it was. And I think I got to 22 the week I launched, which I was quite pleased about.
Yeah.
But how do you, if you're doing a series, how do you maintain that? You can't, can you, when you're first starting out? So when I first launched and I had 10 episodes coming out one week after the other, I kind of kept in the top 15, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, top 50. But then as soon as you don't have a episode coming out, you kind of seem to you drop down, right? So how do you keep that? Or is it just that I'm not doing enough of ongoing sharing of the existing episodes, if that makes sense?
Yeah. Good question. And congratulations on the success of your podcast. I remember seeing it either 20th or around about that, like you say. So you partly answered your own question, is that for me, you want to repurpose your podcast once you've got a series. You want to repurpose that. So if you think of one episode in isolation, you promote that episode for 7 days till the next one is released, promoted. And there's a bunch of different posts you can do around that. For example, if you want to talk about it on LinkedIn, you could pull out 2 or 3 topics that you turn into a long form article. You might want to put a picture on Instagram with a quote against a picture of the person you interviewed. You might want to put an audiogram together. And for people, that's the audio overlaid with images and then subtitles. So you're literally appealing to everybody's senses other than taste or smell. They can't taste or smell your podcast. Not yet. So I would just say you're going to repurpose that. You're going to go back into your back catalogue. So you've got things like hashtag Throwback Thursday, hashtag Motivation Monday, whatever it might be. This week I'm going to talk about 2 other subjects that came back from episode 1 or episode 2. And you just turn it into brand new content. Put a different title, use different colors, use different typeface, different images, different quotes. You could just keep spinning that as long as you can. So if you're going to do, say, 4 series I think if you're going to launch one series and stop, then clearly that's a struggle. But if you're going to do 4 series in a year of 4 to 8 episodes each, that's definitely doable, and supplement that around the other stuff that you're doing, then yeah, that's 100% doable.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, I have to admit, I've been a bit slack at like promoting it since, and actually, I just prompted me to go back in and look at like the stats while we were on the phone, and
because then you know, because the way the algorithm works at the moment is that it's number of new subscribers, number of new downloads, number of new ratings and reviews. And you know, there's disagreement in the industry as to whether new downloads or new ratings and reviews count, but there's 100% agreement that it's massively weighted on new subscribers, which is, if you think of in my space, like a Gary Vaynerchuk or a Rob Moore in the UK, they've got, you know, millions of followers, downloads. How can you possibly make a splash when you launch your podcast? Because it's based on new ones. So myself and these guys constantly trying to get new listeners. If you just keep with your existing audience and tell and build them into an email list and email them every week with, you know, the new episodes and on social, then you're not going to, you know, splash in the charts again. You're going to start going backwards and going from, you know, 50 to 150 to 250.
Yeah.
It's all based on new ones and you know, increasing that community.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's given me a kick up the pants then, isn't it?
I did have a look and see how much you'd promoted it on LinkedIn. I was going to go, I need to have a word with Karen. In my research.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I did when all the episodes were coming out, and then I've been a bit, you know, kind of leads us on to the other thing we're talking about offline before we started. I've been a bit rubbish, to be honest, at social media over the last month because...
Likewise.
Oh, it's just exhausting, isn't it?
It is.
And,
it's all consuming, and you know, I people like my brother, who's not on any social media channel, doesn't have his own business, I'm highly jealous of, because you know, it adds, at least for me, I've got it down to 45 minutes to create something and put it out on 4 channels. But you know, I now have a team that we have regular posts scheduled a month in advance. But you want to be able to be proactive and be able to react to stuff that comes out and actually put something new out if there's, you know, something relevant to your niche that you need to comment on. So I've got my head back in the game, but it's taken me a good month, if not 2 months, to actually go, okay, you need to do this, Alex.
I've just looked at my own Instagram, and we're on the 30th of January, and I've got 9 posts that I've made in January, as an example. I mean, talk about do as I say, not do as I do. When I talk,
I know, but we're always the worst.
So that, as an example, and the last time I mentioned the podcast was November the 19th.
Boom, there's your answer.
So there's my answer. Oh no, hang on. 30th of November was the last time I mentioned it.
Still your answer.
You know, it's not good enough. That's 2 months ago. So so consistency of promotion. And I think you're right.
I did the same. When I launched my podcast, I had a really good first year. And then the second year, life got busy with live events, and my focus shifted because the podcast was established, and I had, you know, really good interviewees like, you know, Richard Reed from Innocent, Ray Kelvin from Ted Baker, all these guys. Focus when I look back at the stats now, my podcast didn't grow, you know, by 100 or 200, you know, a couple hundred people either way. I didn't lose them, but I didn't gain them. So clearly that showed me all my subscribers stayed the same, and that's why I wasn't charting. And it's not all about charting, of course, but you want to see growth in any area of your life, don't you? Whether that's your business, your group of friends, your interests. So, 100%. You know, as you've experienced, the hard work begins when you've launched the podcast.
And actually, that's been a bit of a revelation to me, because I think when I first met you, and I was sort of like saying, which was, I think, this time last year, maybe a little bit later, So I think when I came down to Bournemouth, was it 2019, beginning of then, or was it?
Yes, it was 2019.
Yeah. So it was beginning 2019, and I remember saying at the time that what I was most concerned about was, just putting myself out there and doing it. And I think that's what most people have the worry with, right? It's the same with video. It's all of that, and it's a bit like, oh, well, who wants to listen to me prattling on, Which is why I decided to do an interview-based podcast anyway, because I thought, well, A, it's more interesting, and B, then it's not about me, it's about the guests, right? But the thing I thought I was going to be most worried about was that whole putting myself out there. And once I'd done it, that became actually the easy part. The most difficult part is keeping the consistency and keeping it going and keeping the momentum. And I don't know how, and I think maybe I took too much of a gap between recording the first series and the second series, because I finished recording the first series probably in end of October. And what are we now, January? And I probably won't release the second series till, it'll be February, because it's the 30th of Jan now. And I don't know if you think there's an optimal time to how much space you should leave. Is there, or is it just... I don't think it matters if you're someone famous, but if you're not,
No.
do you have a feeling for that, what you should do?
No, and I agree. If you're famous, influencer, whatever you want to call it, then I think any time. What I've noticed from helping different brands, different entrepreneurs launch their own podcasts is that, and looking at the stats, is that Easter and August in general, and then Christmas, up until Boxing Day, funnily enough, are really, really quiet times for downloads. So you can either look at that. I think there's two ways you can look at it. Either don't launch then because it's really quiet, or two, you can go, there's an opportunity there. No one else is launching in that time. So I'm going to launch mine then and make a big song and dance about it. For me, I would probably steer clear, just because I've noticed just the downloads drop through the floor. And you think, hey, people are going on holiday. They're going to have loads of time to listen to podcasts, but they don't.
Yeah. I listen to most podcasts when I'm on the train.
Yes, me too. Yeah.
But I've been a bit rubbish. I listening to business ones. I mean, I've got a couple that I really love. I love Mary Portis's podcast.
Yes, yeah.
Love her podcast. I love the way she does it. Gets broken up. It's just a bit of intro of hers. And I didn't, obviously, I'm in no way comparing myself to Mary Portis, but, she does a bit of intro, doesn't she? Commentary, and then she does interview, and then a little bit at the end. But one of my all-time favourites is the Peter Crouch podcast.
That Peter Crouch podcast. Yeah.
I love it. I think it's just the funniest thing ever. And it isn't all about football. I mean, it is, because he's an ex-footballer.
Yeah, life though, isn't it?
But it isn't, and it's hilarious. And I often find myself sitting on the train just laughing out loud. It's ridiculous.
I was walking through Tesco's yesterday listening to another one, Andy Frisella, and I was just like laughing my head off. And I just thought, people looking at me, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm not crazy. I might look a bit crazy as well. But,
so you've mentioned stats a couple of times. How do you find all those? I mean, I look at the stats for I published my podcast through what was Pippa and is now Acast. So that you put it in one place, and then it gets it out to multiple platforms on your recommendation. I did that. But are you just looking at the stats within your sort of, what do we call this? Management? What do we call one of these platforms?
Hosting platform, same as like a website. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you just look at the stats there, or is there somewhere else that you can look at stats overall?
Yeah. So for me, I have that, and I also have something called chartable.com. On which I can see how all of the podcasts, I put all of the podcasts I want to follow in there.
Right.
And I can see how they're all doing on a daily basis. I mean, it becomes addictive, this stuff, unfortunately, like any of it does. And you shouldn't pay too much attention to it, of course, but we do. And depending on the platform you're on, which I do need to double check, there's something called Smart Links. And basically it will give you a graph, daily, monthly, daily, weekly, monthly, of how many downloads you get and on your platform, and then it will track them using their software and give you the stats that they manage to track, and theirs are invariably more. So give you an example. I had one last week. It's not only small, but look, Libsyn, my hosting platform, 798 downloads on January the 21st. They've tracked 851. So that's another 60 downloads. But, compound that over 365 days, and that could add up to quite a few more. Here's another one. Libsyn, 593, January the 29th, yesterday. They've tracked 736. So that's another 140 downloads. Again, that's thousands and thousands over a year, isn't it? So
yeah.
And it gives you the charts for every chart in the world. That's where I got your stats from, funnily enough.
Because I was thinking, well, where's he getting them from?
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was looking on iTunes. I couldn't see where it was. But that's fine. That's good. Now I'm going to become addicted to that.
Sorry, I've told you about it.
That's okay. No, it's good because actually I can see when I release the second series, hopefully in about 2 weeks' time. I'm saying that I haven't got any of the episodes off to the
producer.
Editor yet, so he's going to be cursing me. Anyway, okay. Yes, we have to wrap up because I know we were late starting because we had a technical problem.
Always a technical problem, I have to say.
But good insights. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your guidance and help in getting the podcast to where it is right now.
No problem. I love seeing people launch successful podcasts and find their voice, which, I'm, sure you've gotten more confident over each episode.
Yeah, for sure.
A bit more about yourself.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, I think, finding your voice, sharing your message, or using your platform to share other stories from other people that inspire and motivate you, or, make a difference to you. Like you said, when you met Alice and Sophie. So it does make a difference. And, as I say, take those tips, take those lists of who you want on your podcast, and just regularly review, same as you'd review the stats that I just mentioned, review who you've contacted and when, and just keep knocking on the door.
Keep prodding them, yeah.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed that episode and that chat with Alex. Alex really is inspirational in how he's managed to get momentum with his podcast. I hope that gave you some insights of your own in order to get going with podcasting, if that's what you're thinking about, and using podcasting to build a good business and build a modern business. That's it from today, from me, from Business is Good, but hope to see you next week. And thanks for tuning in. Tune in next week where we'll have more inspirational stories talking about moving your business beyond what it is and moving it more towards what you're in business for, what's important, and doing good and changing the way things should be done.